lovely rose garden, and welcome to Roselin Reviews. I'm Avalon Roselin, indie author, and your Autism Self-Advocacy Network member for the evening. Paige Not Found by Jen Wilde was yet another book I picked up at the Scholastic Book Fair and read over the summer. Specifically, it was the book that I read while I waited for my copy of Zombies vs. Unicorns to arrive, offering a break from the horror books I'd been reading all summer long. And I am so glad I did, because Paige Not Found far exceeded my expectations. I felt so seen by this book, and while it is definitely a modern book, down to the main antagonist clearly being an ex-bee for Elon Musk, I wish it had existed when I was younger. I felt the need to make a full review video for this book because I would really love it if more people were talking about it. I know that middle grade books aren't very popular on social media, but you know what? They should be. Some of the most poignant pieces of literature that I've ever interacted with have been written for a young audience, and there is a lot of social commentary in Paige Not Found regarding modern society that should be examined. Also, you may notice that the scores for this book are slightly different than they were in my reading wrap-up video for Summerween. While reflecting on Paige Not Found for this video, I did change my mind a little bit about a few things, but I still think that the book is good overall, and I'll talk more about some of those changes later on because they mainly concern the ending. For now, let's start with the base synopsis. Paige is autistic. Years ago, her parents signed her up for an experimental program without her knowledge or consent that inserted a chip into her brain called the Dot, which monitors every aspect of her life and sends a daily report to her parents. Originally, the Dot was supposed to be used as a treatment or cure for autism, which is already problematic because autism doesn't need a cure. But now its parent company Nucleus Nanotech is being merged with a social media company called Homepage that is notorious for mishandling and selling user data. Understandably upset by this development, and at discovering this all by accident rather than being told by her parents, Paige seeks out the other subjects in the Dot experiment to team up and shut down the merger. Obviously, representation is a big selling point of this book, and my opinion is that it was really solid, at least where Paige and Kelsey are concerned. I don't have as much experience with nonverbal autistics to know if Marcus is an accurate representation of that experience, as I am only partially nonverbal. I really liked the broadness of the spectrum that is shown. For example, Kelsey loves dressing up, while Paige's texture sensitivity makes her really uncomfortable. Marcus's dad is also autistic, and one of Paige's parents is researching it to find out if she might be as well, while Kelsey's mom is a #autism mom who films her meltdowns to sell wellness products and doesn't understand how this is a violation of her privacy. The best way I can put my reaction to the representation into words is Paige Not Found is the only traditionally published book I've ever read that included a depiction of autistic joy, of main characters who I believe are actually happy being on the spectrum and don't want to be allistic. Sure, there are aspects of being autistic that make certain things more difficult, and moments of what-if thinking, but those are never shown to be greater than the pride and fulfillment the protagonist group have in being themselves. The book also tackles a lot of issues that come up for autistic people in general social situations, which hit home for me, like being overly possessive of a friend-turned-crush. This is something I've seen with a lot of AFAB people on the spectrum, particularly the idea of having one or two best friends and feeling defensive or jealous when they make other friends. When Paige's best friend Mara starts to become close with Kelsey, sharing things with her that she doesn't with Paige because she, sometimes correctly, assumes Paige wouldn't be interested, Paige gets upset and views Kelsey as a rival for Mara's attention, even when they are trying to accomplish the same goal of stopping the merger with Homepage. And this leads to some legitimately unpleasant moments from Paige that push Mara further away, as she is still coming to terms with the idea that she has a crush on her friend and may not be cis. This is a very real thing that happens. First crushes and figuring yourself out are messy for people not on the spectrum or in the LGBT community, and adding those factors in can really turn it into a disaster zone. I like that Paige Not Found isn't afraid to show real flaws in the main character that mirror the behaviors and actions of real life young adults. Hell, sometimes even real life adults. Paige also basically says, I'm probably non binary, but we don't have time to unpack that right now, and I felt that in my soul. Maybe some of this seems heavy handed to other readers, but as someone who is on the spectrum and is queer, I'm not saying this book would have saved me from years of internalized ableism and queerphobia, but it definitely would have shortened the sentence. The queer representation was a happy little surprise in this book, and based on my own life, pretty accurate. Also, the villain of the book is basically an ex-spy of Elon Musk, right down to having an interest in space travel as a vanity project and merging with a popular social media company, though Homepage is a lot more like Facebook than Twitter, so there's that. I do love hating on billionaire man children, and hey, he's apparently autistic in real life as well, so you truly get the full range of the community on display in one book. I don't even mean that in a tongue-in-cheek way. Maxwell, another one of the test subjects, is a huge douche canoe who totally buys what Nucleus and Homepage are selling. Because being autistic does not mean you are exempt from being a bad person with horrible views. And Paige Not Found doesn't try to sugarcoat that or present autism as an excuse for anything. There are parts of the book where Paige herself fails to take others' feelings into consideration. In fact, not thinking of others is one of her primary character flaws, as demonstrated early on during what is basically a World of Warcraft quest. And this is something she has to overcome. Yes, her autism makes it a little harder for her to navigate those kinds of social situations, but it isn't an excuse for her to not put in the effort to understand other people. Paige Not Found has a lot to say about the queer and autistic experience, about ethics in business and science, about autonomy and human rights, about the relationships between parents and children, and how it's possible to harm the people you love even when you mean well. And I think all of these are conversations well worth having, both with the intended demographic and other adults. Paige's journey, her doubts, her fears, her acceptance of herself, are all things that resonated with me and legitimately would have helped me. It is rare for me to read a book and feel so thoroughly seen, understood, and represented by the protagonist. I could have really stood to learn some of the things that Paige does when I was that age, especially when it comes to radical self-acceptance in a world that loves to tell you who and what you should want to be. Now, all that said, Paige Not Found isn't a perfect book, but to discuss why, we'll have to get into spoilers. Thank you for watching this far into the video. There are spoilers ahead. If you would rather enjoy this media without spoilers, please stop here. But before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can also check out the links in the description for other ways that you can support Roselin Books, such as purchasing my books or becoming a supporter on Patreon or Ko-fi. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you again soon. A lot of the criticism I've seen around this book revolves around the ending breaking the suspension of disbelief, and unfortunately, I have to agree. As much as I love a good kid heist story, the total lack of security and issues the protagonist group faces when they break into Nucleus is a little ridiculous. They meet one of the developers of the dot and pretty much completely flip her onto their side with a single conversation, and what she does to help them would have serious legal ramifications for her. I didn't completely hate the ending. I like that Kelsey was able to leverage her massive follower count to put XB Musk on the spot with regards to the actions he can take against them, since it'll be broadcast to millions of people. And I enjoyed the reveal that the parents, who have been largely absent throughout the book, have actually been meeting to put together a lawsuit against Nucleus to protect their kids' information. Definitely not the kind of publicity he would want with a high-profile merger in process, and I could see him maybe being willing to cut a deal to keep things quiet, if not for, well, Dr. Lisa is really the main issue I have with the ending. She's the head of the DOT program and is the developer whose entire opinion on the project and company is flipped with a conversation. Admittedly, she was already having some doubts, particularly with regards to the merger, but her inclusion does come off as a bit of a deus ex machina since she's able to lock XB Musk out of his own office and delete all the data on the kids. And then Paige's dad is able to just go shut down the servers and prevent the data from being backed up? How? It kind of feels like Jen Wild wrote the characters into a corner near the climax and then had to make some pretty massive leaps in logic for them to succeed. Also, the actions that they take at the Nucleus headquarters would definitely put their lawsuit in jeopardy since XB Musk is countersuing for trespassing, property damage, loss of profit, and so forth. I just don't see how this would realistically end well, and I wish that some different choices had been made that incorporated elements of the finale and executed them with a little more realism. If Dr. Lisa was cut and the parents and kids were able to force XB Musk into a negotiation to remove their data from the servers before the merger proceeds, or else they'll sue, and him begrudgingly agreeing because he's on a live broadcast, I just would have done things a little differently is all. And that's all for my thoughts on Paige Not Found. I really hope this book becomes more popular and discussed in bookish spaces online. I'd also love to read more books with good autism representation, especially if it overlaps with queer representation, so please leave any recommendations you have for books like that. And if you're interested in reading my take on autistic representation, maybe check out Like Falling Stars, which features an autistic male lead with social anxiety. Have you read Paige Not Found? Will you read it? When will you read it? Leave a comment down below to let me know, and keep growing until next time, Rose Garden.